A wave of protests sweeping the country. Iran has seen demonstrations like this before, but is this one different? It's triggered a strong response, an internet blackout, and a warning from Iran's supreme leader of a crackdown to come. Is his grip on power being tested to destruction? Despite the threats and for all the warnings, Iran's protest movement is defiant. And despite an internet blackout, these images have emerged from the capital tonight, thousands on the march. Posted to social media too, images that suggest the regime is fighting back against the greatest peril it has faced for many years. Over 13 unbroken nights, the demonstrations have grown bigger and bolder. They hurl fireworks at the feared security forces, who show untypical restraint in response. Elsewhere, what could be the sound of gunfire. Though the huge crowd isn't cowed, confident in America's promise to hit back if the Iranian authorities crack down. Confrontation grows more likely. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in a speech to supporters today, vowed there'd be no backing down against protesters he called vandals in the service of Donald Trump. Within hours, that prompted this rebuke from the White House.
If they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard where it hurts. And that doesn't mean boots on the ground, but it means hitting them very, very hard where it hurts.
There is a chasm of understanding between supporters of the Islamic regime and a young generation of activists like Mariam, who once shared makeup tips and now urges protests. The real troublemakers are Iran's corrupt leaders, she says. But she is safely outside Iran. Inside, the authorities have tried to cut all lines of communication. In the past, a signal of violent suppression to come.
They do not want to create martyrs for the opposition. So they will try to stop violence as much as they can. But at the same time, violence is the only thing they know how to use. So they are going to use violence when they think it's necessary.
Some protesters raised the flag of the old nation, of the Shah of Iran, deposed almost 50 years ago. His son, the exiled crown prince, urged protesters to fight on. Victory is assured, he said. These are pivotal moments. Protests that began over Iran's economic ills have spread far and wide. The symbols of power are falling, but it's not yet clear what might topple the regime itself. With me now is the activist, filmmaker and the editor of the Iran News Wire website, Mazir Bahari. Mr. Bahari, we have seen many protests in Tehran over the years. It has been so far a false dawn for the opposition. Is this time different, and if so, why?
I don't know. The short answer is that we don't know. But this series of demonstrations is very different from the previous ones because it is started because of economic needs. The first series of demonstrations in recent years started in 2009 because people thought that the elections were rigged, and they were asking, "Where is my vote?" Which means, where is my rights as citizens? Then we had the demonstrations in 2022, Women Life Freedom Movement, which was mainly about women's rights. But this time around, it is started by the merchants in the bazaar, the business community. and they had tangible needs. They were demonstrating against the corruption in the economy, mismanagement of the economy, and then they were joined by millions of other people who are asking for a change in the regime, or for a regime change in a sense. But there is no alternative in sight. There have been no negotiations, as we know, between the opposition and the government or the military forces. And as a result, we don't know what is going to happen. The regime may brutalize the protesters the same way that it did previously, but that is not going to get rid of the problems. The demonstrators will come out again, maybe in 3 months' time, maybe in 3 weeks' time, or maybe in a year time. The problems of the regime will not go away because of the brutality that it's going to use. It's
to what
just
extent
maybe
are the
postponing.
demonstrators this time spurred on and encouraged by the US President Donald Trump, who's on a roll when it comes to foreign interventions, promising a few days ago that if the Iranian regime starts killing protesters, then the Americans will hit them hard back?
So the protests started towards the end of December, before the abduction of Maduro and before President Trump made any comments. But we cannot deny that the demonstrators, the protesters, were inspired by the leader of the only superpower in the world, and the fact that the President of the United States is supporting them. But the regime is going to try to portray these protests as a Zionist, American inspired protest, but they have done that in the past, and it's not going to affect the will of the people to come out and protest for their rights.
Is the Iranian opposition confident that America would make good on Donald Trump's words and indeed start bombing Tehran again?
The problem with your question is that you asked for Iranian opposition. There is no such thing as Iranian opposition. There is no cohesive opposition right now. The regime is really weak. And if there were a cohesive opposition that had a strong leadership, it would be able to defeat the regime. But there are many opposition figures, there are many opposition movements, but we cannot talk about a cohesive opposition movement as we had in Poland in the past, or South Africa, or they have in Venezuela. So whatever demands that different leaders of oppositions may have, I don't think that Trump is going to listen to them at the moment.
You make a very good point, and it leads me to my next question. Is there any way in which the Crown Prince, who has been trying to rally demonstrators from outside the country, he's been in exile almost all his life. He's the son of the Shah, who was thrown out by millions of Iranians back in 1979. Is there any way that this Crown Prince could be the figure around which opponents to the regime rally?
I think try is the operative word in your question, and he may try to do certain things, but for opposition figures in the past, in order to take over the government, they had to do two things. They either had to write a manifesto that people could read and understand the objectives of the leader of the opposition, or the opposition figure could gather a group of acolytes and followers and take over the government. Ho Chi Minh, the Vietnamese opposition leader, was a dishwasher in Paris for many years, and he organized the Communist Party of Vietnam in order to take over the colonial power. Mr. Pahlavi, unfortunately, for the past 47 years that he's been in exile, maybe for the first 20 years he was young and he was not experienced, but for the past 20 years, he has not been able to create an opposition, a cohesive opposition, a group of followers that would be led by him. So even if he comes to power, unfortunately, I think he will be a very weak leader. He's a very weak leader at the moment, and I don't think that we can call him the opposition leader. He is an opposition leader, one of many opposition leaders. Of course, he has the name recognition, and he's someone that people are nostalgic about, rightly or wrongly, about his father's era and his grandfather's era. But he has not shown real leadership in the past few decades. So even if by some sort of chance and luck, he becomes the leader of Iran for a while, he will lead a very weak government, and he will be someone like the king of Zahid Shah, the king of Afghanistan that no one remembers at the moment.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has denounced the protesters as vandals and saboteurs. He's talked about a crackdown. The internet has been switched off. Do you think that's what's going to happen next, that the regime will do, as it has so many times before, use violence to crush the demonstrations?
It is possible that the regime uses violence against protesters, and we are hearing some news from Iran. The news is very sporadic because of, as you mentioned, the internet shutdown. But the regime knows how to use violence. But at the same time, martyrdom is something that's celebrated in Iran. So the regime tries to create its own martyrs, and they have announced that at least 50 officers have been killed in different parts of the country. So they have their own martyrs, and they do not want to create martyrs for the opposition. So they will try to stop violence as much as they can, but at the same time, violence is the only thing they know how to use. So they are going to use violence when they think it's necessary in order to kill people, the same way they did in 2022 when they killed more than 500 people and they maimed and blinded thousands of protesters who were peacefully protesting for their rights. So Khamenei is using threats, and his followers are going to act upon his orders, but we don't know how violent the regime is going to get. And at the same time, I was talking to a couple of officials from Iran 2 months ago, before all the protests started, and it was after the 12-day war with Israel and after the American attack against the Iranian nuclear sites. And they were telling me that the Khamenei and his regime, they're really afraid of Trump because he's unpredictable, and he's shown that he means what sometimes, most of the time, he does what he says. And now that President Trump has threatened the regime with retaliations, if they use violence against the protesters, they may be careful about what they're doing. But at the same time, Khamenei today, he equated President Trump with Pharaoh, and he said that he's going to fall the same way that other pharaohs in the past have fallen. So it's a very unpredictable regime. So, but it knows how to use violence, and it has used violence in the past.
You say it's an unpredictable regime, but let me ask you to predict it. Here we have an Iranian government weakened by American and Israeli military action. It's now facing the biggest demonstrations across the country since probably 2009. Could it be that we are in the last stages of the Islamic Republic of Iran?
It could be if we had a cohesive, strong opposition. The Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic, is very lucky that the opposition, the Iranian opposition figures, they have been their own worst enemies. After 2022 demonstrations, they tried to gather together, they tried to create a united front, but it didn't last even a month, and they started to backstabbing each other. So this time around, I do not see anyone leading the opposition. Of course, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is someone that people call for his return, but he has, as I mentioned before, he has not shown the leadership necessary in order to take over power.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we do not have Nelson Mandela's or Václav Havel's or Lech Wałęsa's in Iran. So otherwise, we would be talking about a different regime at the moment.
Mazia Bahari, thank you very much for your time. Donald Trump says he is watching events closely in Tehran. So is the rest of the world. We will speak again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we can speak now to Dan, who's in Washington for us tonight. Good evening to you, Dan. So, look, we're used to strong words from President Trump. How seriously do you think the Iranian regime is going to be taking what he said this evening? And what kind of action could he potentially be talking about in Iran?
Well, I think undoubtedly, Paul, they will be taking it very seriously. He reiterated that threat to the regime a couple of times in that long hour and 20-minute press conference. At one point, I think he put it most pithily when he said to the Iranians, you better not start shooting because we'll start shooting too. And he has form on using air power to hit the Iranians. Back in June, you'll remember Operation Midnight Hammer, when B-2 bombers hit 3 different nuclear sites across the country. And in his first term, he took out the head of the feared Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qasem Soleimani, in January 2020. The regime now in Iran is more fragile than it's ever been, I think. And when he talks about hitting them hard and hitting them where it hurts, I think he's going to have a very delicate decision to kind of calibrate exactly how many people he is willing to tolerate being killed by the regime before he is willing to act. He's ruled out boots on the ground, but I think they are seriously considering the use of air power. He's made that very clear.
OK, Dan, a tense weekend ahead in Tehran. Thank you very much indeed.